been in quarantine now for 3 entire months, and it hasn't always been easy. But the good news is that everyone else has had to quarantine as well. So if everyone did that, we should have flattened the curve, and now it's finally safe to open up. Let's just take a look at COVID cases here in the Bay Area. Oh, fuck. Well, I guess we should just pump the brakes on reopening the state. Oh, no. Well, I suppose we'll just have to ramp up testing to make up for the... shit. So we're about 26,000 tests per day short. So I guess I'll just keep staying inside. Fun. This is fun and not at all frustrating. I love it. It's easy to get that existential dread creeping in at this point. Like, what have I been doing all this time? I haven't been inside a Trader Joe's since February, and I ran out of everything but the bagel seasoning in March. I haven't gone surfing because my surf spa is in a county with tough travel restrictions, and I want to respect that. I carry a mask on all the runs I go on in case people get too close, and for all of that, what's the point? And what's the point of continuing to do that while people like Elon Musk are flagrantly opening up their Tesla factories like nothing's wrong, and Karens and Kyles are sneaking into salons to get haircuts, and Jesus. But here's the thing, we can't let that shit get us down. So to remind us all of why we're continuing to quarantine, let's talk about a little bit of good news for once. A new study just published in Nature found that despite the continued plateau of COVID-19 cases in the United States, our relatively minimal efforts have had massive positive repercussions. Like, you think this is the worst timeline, but it's not. Like, yes, I know that there is a timeline out there where our president was literally anyone other than Donald Trump, and we were prepared with adequate PPE and testing and mask usage. And also in that timeline, Kurt Russell and John Carpenter made a third Escape movie where Snake Plissken fucks off to the moon. But there's also a timeline that's even worse than our current one, where no states enacted any social distancing measures, where all the bars and restaurants and gyms stayed open, and the United States in that timeline saw nearly 5 million more confirmed cases than we saw in this timeline, which, due to a lack of testing, would actually mean about 60 million more infections. And when you take into account that the United States wasn't nearly as effective as many other countries, we can look at several countries together, as this study did. We can look at China, South Korea, Italy, Iran, and France, and see that all 6 countries together avoided 500 million additional infections. These numbers come from researchers at UC Berkeley, led by the director of that school's Global Policy Laboratory, who examined how quickly coronavirus spread in several different countries before any disease control measures were put into place. They found that the number of cases grew per day about 38%, which doubled cases about every 2 days with no policies in place. Then they dug into the national and subnational policies that were implemented in each place. So taking into account different cities and different counties and states enacting different measures to stop the spread. In total, 1,717 non-pharmaceutical interventions were looked at. They found that it took about 3 weeks for the results of each measure to become clear. And they also found that some policies were more effective than others at controlling the spread. The best policies were large-scale social distancing measures like safer at home, shutting down businesses. Travel restrictions were just so-so at effectiveness. In some cases, they were very effective, like in Iran and France, but they didn't do so much elsewhere, like here in the US. Interestingly, school closures didn't seem to have much of a benefit at all, though they pointed out that they need to do more research on that particular topic to figure out if that's true. That's hugely helpful information to have, which is why they've released their data to the general public. Countries that are just now starting to see infections really take off, like Brazil and Mexico, can use that data to enact smarter policies, if they're smart. And countries like the United States that are still in the midst of our first wave might be able to use it to continue to cut down on cases, even as we continue to reopen some places. It's worth noting that this study only looked at how many infections and confirmed cases we could have expected without intervention, and not at how many deaths. You might think that if it's a direct relationship between infections and deaths, then we actually had 367,000 confirmed cases as of April 6th, which is the date that this study ended, and we had 14,000 deaths. Compare that to the 7 million confirmed cases that we would have had instead. That's 19 times more, which would mean 266,000 deaths, an increase of 252,000 people who are now dead. That's like an extra 84 9/11s. Personally, I find it apt to measure deaths due to government incompetence in terms of how many 9/11s it is. But it's not a direct relationship, and figuring out how many deaths would actually have occurred would rely on many more factors, like hospitals being overwhelmed and unable to keep as many people alive as they can now. The potential increased number of deaths would be incalculable for this particular study. But if you want a general idea, another study has also just been published in Nature that found that 11 countries in Europe prevented more than 3 million deaths by locking down. When discussing the number of deaths we avoided by sheltering in place and shutting down the economy, the lead author said something that I find incredibly inspiring, and I'm going to think about this whenever I'm feeling like quarantine is pointless. He said, "The last several months have been extraordinarily difficult, but through our individual sacrifices, people everywhere have each contributed to one of humanity's greatest collective achievements. I don't think any human endeavor has ever saved so many lives in such a short period of time. There have been huge personal costs to staying home and canceling events, but the data show that each day made a profound difference. By using science and cooperating, we changed the course of history." Think about that. No human endeavor in history has ever saved so many human lives in such a short period of time. You did that. You did that by staying home, by wearing a mask, by washing your hands, by caring about your fellow humans. So good job, you. 5 to 60 million people in the United States alone are healthy because of you. Or at least they don't have coronavirus, which is amazing. That's incredible that you did that. So please keep that in mind the next time you're sad because you're missing your friends, or upset because your roots are growing out, or you're annoyed because you're missing that big Rage Against the Machine Run the Jewels show that was canceled. It's worth it. You're really a hero. Keep it up.